Is your airsoft gun wired to Dean's just like mine? That means you're running one of the better connectors to keep your motor fed with juicy electricity. But sometimes you need a new battery, and the only ones for sale at the time are in Tamiya, this dreaded green-yellow piece of crap. Let's change that. What you'll need: your battery, female Dean's connector, optionally a male Dean's connector, they usually come in pairs, a soldering iron, don't hold the metal, solder, flux. I prefer liquid flux, especially since when I do thicker gauge wire, I need to get the flux in between all the little strands of the wire, and paste or wax flux just never really works for me. Wire strippers, or you can use your snipping, cutting, whatever tool to carefully remove the insulation around your wire and pull it off. A replacement heat shrink. Another optional, something to get rid of all the nasty fumes that you would otherwise be inhaling. A ventilator thing, I don't remember what it's called, but it takes the nasty flux gases away from my face so I don't inhale them and hate myself later. And of course, something to snip the old stuff off. Let's get started. I have a fancy piece of steel, so I can stick my fancy little gooseneck arm here. Get your battery, inspect all of the wires. Note the one with the connector you will be changing. Do not touch this. This is called the balance lead. It has a wire going in between each cell and from the main positive and main negative. Pack positive, pack negative contacts, so your smart charger can tell what voltage each cell is at to balance charge. Don't touch them. And then go in for snips. Do not snip both wires at the same time, especially if your tools are metal. That's a great way to short your battery and kill it. Maybe start a fire. Let's start with positive. Once you have the wire snipped, insulate it so you can move on to the other one without worrying about this shorting on something around you on accident. Now for the negative wire. Get rid of this warning. Who cares about warnings? Strip wire. Flux wire, tin wire, you don't have to do this, but if you want to check if you've tinned it very thoroughly, you can just snip off the tip here to make sure it looks solid all the way through. Insulate, on to the next one, uninsulate, strip, flux, tin. Insulate again, set them aside, grab your female connector and optionally your male connector. We are not going to be soldering the male connector, it's just going to be here as assurance, just in case if we leave the iron on for too long on either of these contacts, and it would melt the plastic holding them and your prongs would no longer be straight. So with the other contact on, it becomes a little bit harder to melt your connector. Flux in. Flux, tin. Once you're tinned, I prefer to start with the positive lead. Snip heat shrink to length, de-insulate, heat shrink around the wire, place the positive on the positive contact. And melt. If your solder joint looks like that, it sucks. Redo it. It might be helpful to flatten the wire. Trying again. Much better. If you end up with a little bit of bump there, you're going to want to snip it off so the heat shrink doesn't get punctured when you heat it. Run your heat shrink up to the joint. And heat it up. Remount your connector, de-insulate your negative wire, flatten it if you want to, prepare the heat shrink, slip it over, and apply. Retin your iron, put it away. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna actually snip just a little bit off the top there because there's a small bump. And slip our heat shrink over it. Heat shrink, the heat shrink. Ha! Ow. There's your battery pack with a fancy new Dean's connector on it. And if you have one, it's quite good practice to then check your battery with a multimeter of some sort.